She whispered a lullaby to calm a child. The Sheikh billionaire collapsed, hearing the secret last song his wife recorded before dying. The desert wind whispered through the towering glass facade of the Burj Al Salam Hotel, carrying with it the scent of jasmine and distant spices. Inside, beneath crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, the world of luxury moved with practiced elegance. Marble floors gleamed under soft golden lighting. Silk curtains framed floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that never stopped reaching toward the sky. But Emma Carter noticed none of it. She stood in the employee corridor, her worn canvas shoes squeaking slightly against the polished floor, clutching a folder of paperwork that determined whether she'd eat this week. 26 years old, with sandy blonde hair pulled into a simple ponytail and eyes the color of rain-soaked earth, Emma had learned long ago not to look up too much. Looking up meant hoping, and hope, in her experience, was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Miss Carter?" The hotel's guest services manager, a sharply dressed woman named Yasmin, reviewed the application with a practiced eye. "Your references from the Chicago care facility are adequate. But you understand this is temporary, 2 weeks maximum, while our regular childcare specialist recovers from surgery." "I understand." Emma's voice was soft, almost apologetic for taking up space. "Thank you for the opportunity." Yasmin's expression softened slightly. "You're American. What brings you to Dubai?" The truth, that Emma had been running from another failed attempt at belonging, another family who'd made it clear she was a convenience rather than a daughter, another reminder that she'd never quite fit anywhere, was too heavy for a job interview. "Change of scenery," Emma said simply. Yasmin nodded, accepting the lie. "You'll be working with our VIP families. Discretion is essential. Some of our guests value privacy above all else." She paused. "Including the Al-Farouq family. Sheikh Rashid's son, Ameer, has been difficult since his mother passed. The previous sitters couldn't handle him." Something in Emma's chest tightened. A motherless child. She knew that particular kind of pain intimately. "I understand," she said again, and this time she meant it. The hotel's private residence wing existed in a different universe from the public spaces. Here, the opulence became almost oppressive, every surface and artwork, every corner designed to remind visitors that they had entered a realm of unimaginable wealth. Emma's first day began at 6 a.m. She was briefed by the outgoing night attendant, given a security badge, and led through a maze of corridors to the Al-Farouq's family's penthouse suite. "He doesn't like to be touched," the attendant warned. "Doesn't talk much either. Good luck." The suite was breathtaking and empty in the way only luxury can be. Modern furniture that looked more sculptural than functional. Art that probably cost more than Emma would earn in her entire lifetime. And in the far corner, near a window overlooking the Persian Gulf, a small boy sat perfectly still. Ameer Al-Farouq was 5 years old, with his father's sharp features softened by childhood, dark eyes that seemed too old for his face, and an expression of careful blankness that Emma recognized immediately. It was the look of a child who'd learned that showing emotion brought pain. "Hi, Ameer," Emma approached slowly, keeping her voice gentle. "My name is Emma. I'm going to spend some time with you today, if that's okay." The boy didn't respond, didn't even look at her. Emma sat down on the floor several feet away, not invading his space. She'd learned this in the group homes. Trauma had a radius, and you had to respect it. "You don't have to talk to me," she said quietly. "We can just sit here together. Sometimes that's nice too." For 2 hours they sat in silence. Emma didn't push, didn't force, didn't try to be entertaining. She simply existed in the same space, a calm presence in whatever storm the boy was weathering inside. Finally, Ameer spoke. His voice was barely a whisper. "She left." Emma's throat tightened. "I know. I'm sorry. Everyone says she's watching from heaven, but I can't see her. I can't hear her."
The ache in those words was unbearable. Emma knew exactly what it felt like to be a child abandoned by death, by circumstance, by people who should have stayed. "My mom left too," Emma said softly, "when I was 14. And you're right, it's hard when people say she's still with you, but you can't feel it." Ameer finally looked at her, those ancient eyes studying her face for lies. "Did it stop hurting?" he asked. Emma wouldn't lie to him. "No," she said. "But it hurt differently, and some days it hurt a little less." "Does your mom watch you from heaven?" I don't know, but sometimes when I'm really quiet, I remember things about her. The way she laughed, how she always sang when she was cooking. And those memories feel like she's close, even if I can't see her." Ameer considered this. Then, so quietly, she almost missed it. "I don't remember what she sounded like." The confession broke something in Emma's chest. To be 5 years old and already forgetting your mother's voice, it was a cruelty that made her own pain feel small. "Would you like me to tell you a story?" Emma offered, "about a princess who turned into music so she could always be with her son?" For the first time, Ameer's expression cracked, just slightly, a fragment of interest. "Okay," he whispered. Emma began to speak, weaving a tale of love and loss, and the way souls could transform into songs carried on the wind. As she spoke, she noticed Ameer's shoulders slowly relaxing, his breathing evening out. When she finished, Ameer asked, "Can you sing?" Emma hesitated. She hadn't sung for anyone in years, not since the last foster home where her voice had been criticized as too quiet, too sad, too much of a reminder of the brokenness she carried. But this child needed it. "What would you like me to sing?" "I don't know any songs," Ameer admitted, his voice small again. Emma thought of the countless nights in group homes and temporary bedrooms when she'd sung herself to sleep with lullabies she'd collected like precious stones, each one taught by a different child, a different culture, a different fragment of the broken world they'd all inhabited. One song in particular rose to her memory. It had been taught to her by a kind Brazilian woman who'd volunteered at the Chicago shelter when Emma was 16. The woman had learned it from her own grandmother, who'd learned it from an Arab friend decades earlier. Emma had never known the exact translation, but the melody was hauntingly beautiful. A song about stars and memory and love that transcended death. "I know one," Emma said softly. "It's in Arabic. I don't know what all the words mean, but it always made me feel like less alone." Ameer nodded. Emma closed her eyes and let the melody rise from somewhere deep in her chest, a place that remembered every lonely night, every moment she'd wished for a mother's voice to comfort her. "Ya layali el-qamar, ya nujum el-sama. O nights of moonlight, O stars of the sky. Rohi ma'aki ikul makan. My soul is with you in every place." The words were ancient, the melody even older. It spoke of eternal love, of souls watching over their children, of light that could never truly fade. "Ruhi ma'aki fi kul makan. My soul is with you in every place." Emma's voice was soft, trembling slightly, but pure. She sang as if the words could build a bridge between this child and the mother he was forgetting. When she opened her eyes, Ameer was crying silently, but for the first time since she'd met him, his expression wasn't blank. It was feeling. "Again," he whispered. Emma sang it again, and as she sang, she gently moved closer, until finally, Ameer leaned against her shoulder. Neither of them noticed the man standing frozen in the doorway. Sheikh Rashid Al-Farouq had built an empire on control. At 48, he commanded industries, influenced governments, and moved through the world with the absolute certainty of a man who'd never encountered a problem he couldn't solve with power or money. But in this moment, his legendary control shattered like glass. he'd returned to the suite early, intending to check on his son before a series of afternoon meetings. What he found instead was impossible. A stranger, an American woman he'd never met, was holding his child, and she was singing the one song in the entire world that shouldn't exist outside his most private memories. Layali, el-qamar, Layla's song. The song his wife had learned in her grandmother's village, a tiny place in the mountains where dialects and melodies were passed down like sacred texts, never written, rarely shared beyond bloodlines. The song Layla had recorded for Ameer 3 weeks before the accident, her voice shaking with premonition, with love, with goodbye. And the song Rashid had listened to exactly once before locking the recording away because hearing it felt like dying.
She knew basic first aid from the care facilities, enough to check for breathing, for a pulse. Both present, but his pulse was erratic. His face had gone pale beneath his tan, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. "Ameer, I need you to press this button." Emma pointed to the emergency call panel on the wall. "Can you do that for me?" The boy, frightened but obedient, scrambled to comply. Within seconds, the suite flooded with people, security, medical staff, hotel management. Emma was pushed aside as trained professionals took over, but not before she caught a clear look at the man she'd been holding. Even unconscious, he radiated authority. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, silver threading through black hair at his temples. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her entire year's salary, and even in collapse, there was something untouchable about him. Sheikh Rashid Al-Farouq, Ameer's father. The man she'd been warned was intensely private, impossible to please, and currently grieving in ways that made him dangerous to work for. And she'd been singing to his child when he collapsed. Emma's stomach dropped. She was going to be fired, possibly arrested. She'd violated some boundary she hadn't even known existed, and now— "Miss Carter." Yasmin appeared beside her, face pale. "What happened?" "I don't know. Ameer asked me to sing, and I did, and then his father was there, and he just fell." "What were you singing?" "A lullaby. Just a lullaby I learned years ago. I didn't think—" "In what language?" Emma's mouth dried. "Arabic, but I don't even know what all the words mean. Yasmin's expression shifted into something Emma couldn't read, alarm mixed with something else. Recognition, maybe. Or dread. "Go to your quarters," Yasmin said quietly. "Don't leave. Don't speak to anyone. Do you understand?" Emma nodded, numb. As she was escorted away, she glanced back at Ameer. The boys stood small and alone amidst the chaos, and their eyes met for just a moment. His expression asked a question. She couldn't answer. "Will you leave too?" Rashid woke to the scent of antiseptic and the quiet hum of medical equipment. He was in the suite's private medical room, an amenity he'd insisted on after Layla's death. Never again would he be at the mercy of public hospitals. Never again would he trust anyone outside his personal physicians. Dr. Farah al-Mansouri, his family doctor for 2 decades, sat beside the bed with her tablet, reviewing his vitals. "Welcome back," she said dryly. "You gave everyone quite a scare." Rashid's mind felt sluggish, fighting through fog. "What happened?" "Vasovagal syncope, most likely. Your blood pressure dropped dramatically, causing you to faint. Have you been sleeping, eating properly, taking your medication?" He ignored the questions. "How long was I out?" 40 minutes. Dr. Farah gave him the look that had intimidated him even as a child. "Rashid, you need to take care of yourself.
This level of stress isn't sustainable. But Rashid wasn't listening. His mind was racing backward, reconstructing the moment before collapse. The song. The American woman. Layla's voice somehow reincarnated in a stranger. The woman who was with Ameer, he said carefully. Who is she? A temporary childcare worker from the hotel staff. American. She was quite concerned, actually, helped prevent you from hitting your head on the marble. I want to speak with her. Dr. Farah frowned. You need rest. Now. There was a quality to Rashid's voice, not anger, but an absolute immovability that even Dr. Farah didn't challenge. She sighed and stood. I'll have someone fetch her, but Rashid. She paused at the door. Whatever this is, remember that fear and grief sometimes make us see connections that don't exist. Be careful. When she left, Rashid closed his eyes and deliberately recalled every note of the song he'd heard. It wasn't similar. It wasn't a coincidence. It was exact. And that should have been impossible. Emma waited in a small sitting room off the main suite, her hands twisted together in her lap, her mind running through worst-case scenarios. She'd be deported, blacklisted, maybe investigated. She'd crossed some invisible line in a world she didn't understand, and now... Miss Carter. Yasmin appeared beside her, face pale. What happened? I don't know. I was just... Ameer asked me to sing, and I did, and then his father was there, and he just... fell. What were you singing? A lullaby. Just a lullaby I learned years ago. I didn't think, in what language? Emma's mouth dried. Arabic, but I don't even know what all the words mean. Yasmin's expression shifted into something Emma couldn't read. Alarm mixed with something else. Recognition, maybe, or dread. Go to your quarters, Yasmin said quietly. Don't leave. Don't speak to anyone. Do you understand? Emma nodded, numb. As she was escorted away, she glanced back at Ameer. The boys stood small and alone amidst the chaos, and their eyes met for just a moment. His expression asked a question she couldn't answer. Will you leave too? Rashid woke to the medical room. With a drain of instantaneous amazement, he had no idea where or how he'd arrived. That was a lie. He certainly did know how, just not why. The note of the song had triggered something. But that was impossible. As he remembered, it was only his Layla's voice. He even still had her recording. He should have still had it. But he never played the song once again. The history behind the song was more important. He didn't think anyone else knew the music. And yet he couldn't shake the feeling that his Layla was not far away. He called his best friend and let him know that the young woman had to be investigated. He needed to know her background, her family, everything. He needed it yesterday. That, to him, was the most important.
And somehow she'd walked into the center of a grief she hadn't known existed. Emma pulled out her phone and opened the only photo she had of her mother, a blurry snapshot from a church carnival, her mom's face caught mid-laugh, forever frozen at 34. "What did you get me into, Mom?" she whispered to the image. The photograph, as always, offered no answers. Outside, the sun set over Dubai, painting the sky in shades of gold and blood. And in separate rooms, separated by walls and worlds and impossible coincidences, two broken people thought about the same melody
and wondered if the universe had a sense of humor. Or a plan. 3 days passed in careful avoidance. Rashid didn't summon Emma again. He reviewed Kareem's preliminary investigation. No criminal record, sparse social media presence, employment history consistent with her story, no suspicious financial connections, and found nothing except poverty and loneliness stretching back to childhood. She was exactly what she appeared to be. Nobody, which somehow made it worse, because nobodies don't stumble into impossibilities by accident. Meanwhile, Emma continued her work with Ameer under the watchful eyes of security cameras and the suspicion she could feel radiating through the suite even when Rashid wasn't present. But Ameer had changed. The boy who'd been silent and withdrawn now spoke in whispers. He asked Emma to sing every day. He held her hand during meals. He smiled, rarely but genuinely. And it was destroying Rashid to watch it. Because he knew Emma was temporary. In 10 more days, the regular child care specialist would return, and this American woman would disappear back into whatever life she'd escaped from. And Ameer would be abandoned again. On the 4th evening, Rashid entered the suite's living area to find Emma reading to Ameer from a children's book about stars. And the little star said, "I may be small, but I shine just as bright. Miss Carter?" His voice cut through the peaceful scene. Emma looked up, startled. "Sheikh Rashid, I didn't hear you come in." "Ameer, go to your room, please." The boy's face fell. "But Papa." "Now." Ameer fled, casting one pleading look back at Emma. When they were alone, Rashid sat across from her, his expression carved from stone. "My son is becoming attached to you." Emma's heart sank. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." I'm not finished." He leaned forward slightly. "In 10 days, you leave. The regular caretaker returns. Ameer will lose another woman he's grown to trust. Do you understand what that will do to him?" Shame burned through Emma's chest. "I was just trying to help." "By making yourself indispensable? By using that song to—" "I didn't use anything." Emma stood, her own anger finally breaking through fear. "I didn't know about your wife or that song or any of this. I'm sorry that my existence is inconvenient for you, Sheikh Rashid, but I've spent my whole life being told I'm too much or not enough or a problem someone needs to solve. I came here to do a job. I care about your son because he deserves to be cared about. And if that's wrong, then fine, fire me. I'll leave tonight." She turned toward the door. "Stop." Emma froze. Rashid's voice had changed, lost the hard edge, become something raw. "You're right," he said quietly. "I apologize. I've been unfair." Emma turned back slowly. The sheikh was standing now, but his posture had shifted. Less armor, more exhaustion. "My wife died 3 years ago," he continued, not looking at Emma. "Car accident. Quick, they said. Painless. But I don't think death is ever painless for the ones left behind." "I'm sorry," Emma said softly. "That song you sang, it was the last thing she recorded for Ameer. A gift for when he was old enough to understand. She had a premonition, I think. Some sense that time was short." He finally met Emma's eyes. "I've listened to it once. I couldn't bear to hear it again. And then you appeared, singing it to my son, and for a moment I thought—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "You thought I was somehow connected to her," Emma finished gently. "Yes, ridiculous, I know." "Is it?" Emma sat back down, her voice thoughtful. "Maybe it's not about me. Maybe it's about Ameer needing to hear that song, to feel close to his mother again. Maybe I'm just the messenger." Rashid considered this. "You believe in fate?" "I don't know. I believe in strange coincidences, and I believe that sometimes when we need something desperately enough, the universe finds a way. Or maybe I just want to believe that, because if I don't, then my whole life is just random suffering with no meaning." The honesty disarmed him. Rashid sat again, and for the first time, they weren't adversaries or employer and employee. They were just two people who understood loss. "Tell me about your mother," Rashid said. And Emma, surprising herself, did. She told him about the good years, before the cancer, before the medical bills that bankrupted them, before her mother's sister reluctantly took Emma in and made it clear she was a burden. She told him about the group homes, the temporary families, the social workers who tried but couldn't save every broken child. She told him about learning songs from dozens of other displaced kids, how music became the only language she could trust because it didn't lie or abandon or change its mind. And she told him about the Brazilian volunteer, Maria, who'd spent 6 months at the Chicago shelter and taught Emma 3 songs, one Portuguese, one Italian, and one in Arabic that Maria said was about eternal love. She said, Emma recalled, that some souls love so deeply they refuse to be separated by death. They find ways to return, in dreams, in memories, in unexpected moments of grace. Rashid was very still. "She said that?" "Yes, I remember because I asked if my mother would come back, and Maria said that she had already had, in my voice, in my kindness, in the way I took care of other children." Emma's eyes were distant. "I didn't believe her then, but sometimes now, when I sing, I feel like I'm channeling something bigger than me, something that remembers how love is supposed to sound." A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Rashid spoke. "Would you sing it again, the lullaby?" Emma hesitated. "Are you sure?" "No, but I think I need to hear it, the way you sing it, not as a recording of a ghost, as something living." Emma closed her eyes and let the melody rise, softer this time, more careful, aware of how much weight these simple notes carried. "Ya layali el-qamar, ya nujum al-sama, ruhi ma'aki fi kul makan, la takhaf ya habibi, ana huna." Don't be afraid, my beloved. I am here. When the last note faded, Rashid's face was wet with tears he didn't bother hiding. "She was beautiful," he said hoarsely. "My Lila. So beautiful, and so afraid of being forgotten." "She's not forgotten," Emma said gently. "She lives in your son, in your memories, in that recording you're afraid to hear." "I can't. You can. Just not today, and that's okay." Rashid looked at this strange American woman who'd somehow stumbled into his most private grief and offered not solutions, but simple, radical acceptance. "Stay," he said abruptly. "What?" "Beyond the 2 weeks. Stay as Ameer's permanent caretaker. I'll triple whatever the hotel is paying you. You'll have full benefits, your own apartment, complete security." "Sheikh Rashid." "Rashid. Just Rashid." Emma stared at him. "Why?" "Because my son smiles when you're here. Because you understand grief in a way most people don't. Because—" he hesitated. "Because I think maybe Lila would have liked you, and I think she'd want you here taking care of our son." It was too much, too fast, too intimate for a relationship that had started with suspicion and collapse. But Emma thought of Ameer's small hand in hers, thought of his whispered requests to hear the lullaby, thought of how for the first time in years she'd felt useful instead of disposable. "I need time to think," she said carefully. "Of course, but Emma," the use of her first name felt significant somehow. "Thank you for being kind to him, for being patient with me, for surviving long enough to end up here." Her throat tightened. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Then people have been fools. When Emma left that night, she felt the first stirrings of something she'd long ago stopped believing.
Rashid was often absent. Business meetings, international calls, the 1,000 demands of managing an empire. But when he was present, Emma noticed things. The way he watched Ameer with an expression of desperate love and helplessness. The way his shoulders tensed when the lullaby played softly from Ameer's room. The way he looked at Emma sometimes, not with attraction, but with confusion, as if she were a puzzle he couldn't solve. And Emma noticed herself noticing him. The silver in his hair that caught the light like threads of moonlight. The rare moments when his severe expression softened into something almost vulnerable. The sound of his voice when he spoke to Ameer in Arabic, the harsh language becoming tender and musical. She told herself it meant nothing. She was an employee. He was her employer, and she'd learned long ago not to confuse proximity with connection. But the heart, as it turns out, is not easily instructed. Salma made her first move on a Thursday evening. She arrived at the penthouse suite unannounced, sweeping in with the confidence of family privilege, dressed in designer elegance that made Emma acutely aware of her own Target clearance wardrobe. "Rashid!" Salma's voice carried the warmth of expensive wine and subtle poison. "I've been trying to reach you for days." Rashid emerged from his study, his expression tightening almost imperceptibly. "Salma, I didn't know you were in Dubai." "Surprise visit. I wanted to check on my favorite nephew." She glanced around the room, her gaze landing on Emma with the precision of a laser sight. "And who is this?" "Emma Carter, Ameer's new caretaker." "How American." Salma's smile didn't reach her eyes. She approached Emma, extending a hand with nails painted the color of fresh blood. "Salma Al-Farouq, Rashid's sister-in-law." Emma shook the offered hand, feeling the strength behind Salma's grip, a test, a warning. "Nice to meet you. How long have you been working with Ameer?" 2 weeks. And before that? Various childcare positions in the United States. Fascinating. Salma turned to Rashid. "Might I speak with you privately?" Rashid's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Emma, would you take Ameer to his room, please?" Emma gathered the boy, who'd been playing quietly with building blocks, and left, but not before catching Salma's expression, a flash of something cold and calculating. In the study, Salma wasted no time. An animus American orphan? Really, Rashid? She's qualified. Ameer responds well to her. I'm sure he does. Young, pretty, conveniently tragic backstory. It's quite the Cinderella story, isn't it? Salma circled the desk like a predator. Have you vetted her thoroughly? Kareem ran a complete background check. And you trust that? Rashid, you're one of the wealthiest men in the Middle East. You have enemies who would love nothing more than to infiltrate your home, your family. Rashid, his voice cut like steel. Salma, what do you want? She softened her approach, moving closer. I want what I've always wanted, to protect this family, to honor your brother's memory by ensuring the Al-Farouq legacy continues. She placed her hand on his arm. You know I've always cared for you, for Ameer. Let me help you. Let me be the stability this family needs. Rashid gently removed her hand. I appreciate your concern, but my household is not your responsibility. It became my responsibility when your brother died and left me alone to preserve his memory. The sudden vehemence startled him. Salma realized her mistake and recomposed herself. "I'm sorry. I worry about you, about Ameer. This American woman knows nothing of our culture, our expectations. She's a stranger singing Layla's song to your child. Doesn't that strike you as invasive?" It did. It struck him as impossible, as painful, as everything he'd been trying not to examine too closely. But he also remembered Emma's honesty, her gentleness with Ameer, the way she'd offered him permission to grieve at his own pace. "She stays," Rashid said quietly. "This discussion is over." Salma's expression hardened for a fraction of a second before the mask of concern returned. "Of course, it's your decision." She moved toward the door, then paused. "But Rashid, I'd be careful. Sometimes the people who seem most harmless are hiding the sharpest knives." When she left, Rashid stood alone in his study, staring at nothing. Salma's words had planted seeds of doubt he couldn't quite dismiss, and somewhere in the penthouse, Emma was singing Ameer to sleep, completely unaware that she'd just been marked as a threat. The next morning, Emma woke to find an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a newspaper clipping, or rather a printed screenshot made to look like one. The headline read, "American grifter targets wealthy families. Pattern of deception spans 5 states." Below was Emma's photo. Her hands shook as she read the fabricated article. It detailed a series of alleged cons, embedding themselves with wealthy families, gaining trust, then disappearing with jewelry, cash, and bank information. The writing was convincing, the sources vague enough to seem credible. None of it was true, but it looked real enough to destroy her. Emma's first instinct was to run, pack her few belongings, and disappear before this poison spread. It was what she'd always done when situations became dangerous or complicated. But then she thought of Ameer, of the promise she'd made to herself to stop running. She took the article to Rashid. He was in the private dining room reviewing contracts over Turkish coffee when Emma entered without knocking. "We need to talk." Rashid looked up, surprised by her intensity. "Emma, what's—" She slapped the article on the table. "Someone is trying to destroy me, and I need you to know, before you hear it from anyone else, that this is completely fabricated." He scanned the document, his expression unreadable. "Where did you get this?" "Someone slipped it under my door. I don't know who, but I can guess why. Someone doesn't want me here, and they're willing to lie to make sure I leave. These accusations are false. Every single word. I've never stolen anything in my life. I've never conned anyone. I'm exactly what I appear to be, a woman with no family, no connections, and no power, which makes me very easy to destroy." Rashid studied her face with an intensity that felt like physical pressure. "You're not running." "What?" "Most people, guilty or innocent, would have packed and fled after receiving something like this. But you came directly to me. Why?" "Because I'm tired of running, because your son needs stability, and because—" She met his eyes. "Because I thought maybe you'd give me the benefit of doubt before condemning me." The moment stretched, fragile as spider silk. Finally, Rashid spoke. "I believe you." "You do?" "I've spent 30 years reading people, Miss Carter. Building a business empire requires knowing when someone is lying and when they're terrified of a truth they can't prove. This is professionally done. Whoever created it has resources and an agenda. Your sister-in-law. You suspect Salma. She looked at me like I was an insect yesterday. And then this appears? It's not exactly subtle." Rashid's expression darkened. He'd known Salma for 20 years, his brother's widow, family by marriage, a woman who'd spent those 2 decades positioning herself as the matriarch of the Al-Farouq legacy. A woman who'd made it clear she expected to become his wife. "I'll handle this," he said. "How?" "By making it very clear that you have my complete protection and that anyone who targets you is targeting me." The words hung between them, weighted with meanings neither was ready to examine. "Thank you," Emma whispered. Rashid nodded, but as she turned to leave, he spoke again. "Emma, why did you really stay?" "The truth." She stopped at the door, her back to him. "Because for the first time in my life, someone asked me to, and I wanted to see what it felt like to be chosen instead of tolerated." When she left, Rashid stood motionless in the expensive silence, her words echoing. Chosen. Such a simple word, such a devastating confession. Salma's second attack came 2 days later at a charity gala hosted by the Al-Farouq Foundation. Emma hadn't planned to attend. It was Rashid's world, not hers, and she was content to stay with Ameer. But Rashid had insisted, his reasoning practical. "If you're part of this household, you should be seen at family events. It sends a message." The message, Emma understood, was protection. She borrowed a simple black dress from one of the hotel boutiques, the least expensive option that still met the event's black tie requirements, and felt immediately, painfully out of place among the designer gowns and glittering jewelry that probably cost more than she'd earned in her lifetime. Rashid appeared beside her as she hovered near the edges of the ballroom, a flute of champagne she wasn't drinking clutched in her white-knuckled hands. "You look terrified," he observed. "I am terrified. Everyone here is looking at me like I'm a stray dog that wandered into a palace. They're looking because you're with me, and they're wondering who you are." "The help," Emma said flatly. "No." Rashid's voice dropped lower. "Someone under my protection. There's a difference." Before Emma could respond, Salma materialized from the crowd, resplendent in emerald silk that matched her calculating eyes. "Rashid and Miss Carter, how unexpected to see you here." She air-kissed Rashid's cheeks, then turned her attention to Emma. "That's a lovely dress. Is it vintage?" The insult was delicate, but unmistakable. "It's borrowed. I don't usually attend events like this."
Obviously. Salma's smile was venomous honey. "Well, you must let me introduce you to some of our guests. I'm sure they'd be fascinated by your background." Before Rashid could intervene, Salma had looped her arm through Emma's and steered her toward a group of elegantly dressed women whose expressions suggested they smelled something unpleasant. "Everyone, this is Emma Carter. She's the American Rashid hired to care for Ameer." "How wonderful," one woman said with thinly veiled condescension. "You must have such interesting stories. What did you do before Dubai?" "Childcare work, group homes mostly." "Group homes?" Another woman's eyebrows rose. "How charitable of you." Salma leaned in conspiratorially. "Emma has had quite a challenging life. Orphaned young, I believe. No family connections." "That's right," Emma said, feeling the trap closing, but unable to see the escape route. "It must be difficult," Salma continued, her voice dripping false sympathy, "living without roots, without heritage, never quite belonging anywhere, always wondering if you're one mistake away from being discarded again." The words landed like precision strikes, targeting every insecurity Emma carried. "I manage," she said tightly. "I'm sure you do, though I must say it takes a certain kind of person to insert themselves into a grieving family, and that's enough." Rashid's voice cut through the conversation like a blade. He had appeared behind Emma, his presence radiating controlled fury. "Salma, a word now." "But we were just getting to know." "Now." The command in his voice left no room for argument. Salma's mask slipped for just a moment before she excused herself with false grace. Rashid guided Emma away from the group toward a private alcove off the main ballroom. "I apologize. That was unconscionable." Emma's hands were shaking. "It's fine. She's right anyway. I don't belong here." "Stop." Rashid turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "Listen to me. Belonging has nothing to do with money or breeding or any of the superficial nonsense those women value. You belong where you're valued, where you're needed, and Ameer needs you. He stopped, the sentence hanging unfinished. "You what?" Emma whispered. For a long moment, Rashid simply looked at her, really looked, as if seeing past the borrowed dress and cheap shoes to something deeper, something that resonated with his own carefully hidden wounds. "I value your presence," he finally said. "More than I should, perhaps." The admission hung between them, dangerous and electric. Emma's breath caught. "Rashid." "Sheikh Al-Farouq," a business associate appeared, shattering the moment. "My apologies, but the ambassador is asking for you." Rashid's jaw clenched with frustration, but he nodded. He looked back at Emma. "Wait for me, please. This conversation isn't finished." He disappeared into the crowd, leaving Emma alone with a heart that beat too fast and thoughts that spiraled into dangerous territory. She was falling for him. The realization was terrifying and inevitable, like recognizing you'd been standing at the edge of a cliff all along. But across the ballroom, Salma watched with cold satisfaction. Phase 2 of her plan was already in motion. The journalist she had paid to attend the gala was already circulating, asking pointed questions about the mysterious American woman who'd appeared in Rashid's life. By tomorrow, Dubai's social media would be buzzing with speculation, gold digger, opportunist, suspicious timing. And the forged financial documents showing Emma receiving payments from one of Rashid's business rivals, those would surface by the end of the week. Sometimes destruction required patience, and Salma had been patient for 3 long years. Emma left the gala early, unable to bear the weight of whispered conversations and pointed looks. She took a car back to the penthouse, checked on sleeping Ameer, and then stood on the private balcony overlooking the glittering city. She should leave. She knew that. Every instinct honed by years of survival screamed that this situation was becoming too complicated, too dangerous. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Ameer's smile, heard his whispered requests for the lullaby, felt the warmth of Rashid's hands on her shoulders. You belong where you're valued. Do you? Or was she just setting herself up for the worst kind of heartbreak? Rashid returned home near midnight to find Emma still on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket against the desert night's chill. "You should be sleeping," he said quietly, joining her at the railing. "Couldn't. Too much in my head." They stood in companionable silence, the city spread below them like scattered diamonds. "What Salma said tonight, Rashid began, "was cruel, but not entirely wrong," Emma interrupted. "I am rootless. I am an outsider, and my being here is complicated. Life is complicated. That doesn't make it wrong." Emma turned to look at him. In the moonlight, with his guard down and exhaustion etched into his features, Rashid looked less like an untouchable billionaire and more like a man carrying impossible weight. "Why did you really ask me to stay?" "The truth." Rashid was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. "Because when you sing that lullaby, I can hear Lila's love for Ameer, and it doesn't destroy me the way her recording does. It heals something." He met her eyes. "You heal something, and I don't understand it, and it terrifies me, but I'm not ready to let that go."
Emma's breath hitched. Rashid, I'm not her. I can't replace. I don't want you to replace her. I want to... He struggled with the words. I want to figure out how to live again instead of just existing, and somehow you make that seem possible. The confession was so honest, so vulnerable, that Emma felt her own walls cracking. I'm scared, she admitted, of caring too much, of getting attached and then being discarded when I'm no longer useful. That's always what happens. Not always, Rashid said quietly. Not this time. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise to try, if you will. It was the fragilest of offerings, two broken people agreeing to be broken together with no guarantee of healing. Emma looked at this powerful man who'd somehow become human in her presence and made a choice that would change everything. Okay, she whispered. I'll try. Rashid's hand found hers on the balcony railing, their fingers intertwining. And for the first time in longer than either could remember, the future felt like something other than an enemy to survive. But across the ballroom, Salma al-Farouq watched with cold satisfaction. Phase 2 of her plan was already in motion. The images her hired surveillance team had just sent were perfect. Rashid and Emma, on the balcony, holding hands. The images would be just what she needed: proof of inappropriate relationship, evidence of manipulation, ammunition for the family members who already questioned Rashid's judgment. Salma opened her laptop and began composing an email to the Al-Farouq Family Council. By the time the sun rose over Dubai, Emma Carter's destruction would be all but guaranteed. And Salma would be there to comfort poor deceived Rashid when the American interloper was finally, permanently removed. The game was accelerating, and Salma always won. The explosion came 3 days later, not with violence, but with bureaucracy. Emma was summoned to Rashid's study to find him standing rigid behind his desk, his face carved from granite, while 3 severe-looking men in expensive suits sat in leather chairs like a tribunal. Miss Carter, one of them began without preamble, I am Khalid Al-Farouq, Rashid's uncle and senior member of the family council. We have concerns. What kind of concerns? Financial irregularities. Specifically, a series of wire transfers from an account linked to the Hakim Group, one of our business competitors, to an account in your name. The air left Emma's lungs. That's impossible. I don't have any accounts that could receive international transfers. I barely have a checking account. Khalid produced documents with damning precision. These records suggest otherwise. $50,000 transferred in 5 installments over the past 3 weeks. Emma looked at Rashid desperately. This is fake. It has to be. I've never seen these accounts, never received any money.
Then the family can address their concerns with me directly. This meeting is over. The 3 men exchanged loaded glances before standing. As they filed out, Khalid paused at the door. Your brother would be disappointed in you, Rashid, allowing emotion to compromise the legacy he died protecting. When they were alone, Emma collapsed into a chair, her whole body shaking. Those documents, how did they... Who could... Salma. Rashid's voice was ice. It has to be. She has the resources, the connections, and the motive. But how do we prove it? We don't need to. Not yet. He knelt before Emma's chair, taking her trembling hands. Emma, look at me. I believe you, completely, and I will not let them destroy you. Why? Tears spilled down her cheeks. Why are you fighting so hard for me? I'm nobody, like they said. I have nothing to offer you except honesty, gentleness, the ability to make my son smile. the courage to stand in front of me with a fake news article and demand to be believed. His grip tightened. "You're not nobody, Emma Carter. You never were." She sobbed once, a sound of relief and terror and gratitude all tangled together. Rashid pulled her into his arms, and for a moment, the empire and the conspiracies and the judgment faded away. There was just this: two people choosing to trust each other in a world designed to tear them apart. But the reprieve was temporary. That evening, Dubai's most popular gossip blog published a story: Sheikh's Secret American Lover, Gold Digger, or True Romance. The article included the balcony photographs, grainy but unmistakable, Rashid and Emma holding hands, looking at each other with undeniable intimacy. It went viral within hours. Emma's borrowed phone exploded with notifications, friend requests from strangers, messages ranging from supportive to viciously cruel, speculation about her past, her motives, her moral character. Ameer, sensing the tension, became withdrawn again, asking for the lullaby but then crying when Emma sang it, as if he knew something terrible was happening but lacked the words to express his fear. And Rashid, besieged by family members demanding explanations, business partners questioning his judgment, and media outlets requesting statements, became increasingly unreachable, trapped in meetings and damage control. Emma found herself alone in the vast penthouse, surrounded by luxury, but drowning in isolation. This was the pattern she knew: get close, create bonds, watch them dissolve under pressure. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she was the problem. Maybe she should just go. On the fifth night of the media storm, Emma made a decision. She wrote a letter, old-fashioned, handwritten, the words blurring as tears fell onto the paper. "Rashid, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Please don't look for me. This isn't about not trusting you or not believing in what we started to build. It's about protecting you and Ameer from the damage my presence causes. Salma was right about one thing. I don't belong in your world. I'm chaos wrapped in good intentions, and everyone I get close to ends up hurt. Thank you for making me feel chosen, even if it was only for a little while. Thank you for defending me when nobody else would. Thank you for letting me believe I could be someone worth fighting for. Take care of Ameer. Play him his mother's recording when he's ready. Tell him that love is real, even when it's complicated. And please, don't remember me as a mistake. Emma." She left the letter on Rashid's desk, packed her single backpack, and took one last look at Ameer sleeping peacefully in his room. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the sleeping child. "I'm so sorry." Then she walked out of the penthouse, past security who barely glanced at her, and into the Dubai night. Within an hour, she was at the airport, using the last of her savings for a standby ticket to anywhere that wasn't here. She didn't look back. She'd spent her whole life not looking back. Rashid found the letter at 2 a.m., after a 16-hour day of fighting his family, his business partners, and his own growing certainty that he was losing something irreplaceable. He read the words once, twice, then a third time, his hands shaking. Then he ran. Through the penthouse, through the corridors, shouting her name. But Emma Carter was gone. And for the second time in 3 years, Rashid Al-Farouq felt his heart shatter. Rashid stood in Emma's empty room, her letter crushed in his fist, and felt the full weight of his failures. He promised protection, he promised she wouldn't be discarded, and yet when the pressure mounted, he'd retreated into meetings and strategy instead of standing beside her. He'd let her face the storm alone while he fought battles in boardrooms, just like he'd failed Layla. Always too late, always one meeting, one decision, one moment of presence too late. "Papa?" Rashid turned to find Ameer in the doorway, clutching his blanket, eyes wide with fear. "Where's Emma?"
The question was so simple, so devastating. Rashid knelt before his son, and for the first time in 3 years, he didn't hide his tears. "She left, Ameer. I'm so sorry. She left because people were being cruel, and I didn't protect her well enough. She promised she wouldn't leave. Everyone leaves. I know, and it's not fair. I hate you." The 5-year-old's scream was raw with betrayal. "You made her go away, just like Mama. You make everyone go away." The words struck like physical blows. Ameer ran to his room and slammed the door, and Rashid heard the sound of his son sobbing with the kind of grief that had no comfort. Because Ameer was right. He'd failed them both. Rashid sat in the darkness of his study until dawn, Emma's letter in one hand, his phone in the other. He'd tried calling her, texting. Her number was already disconnected. He'd contacted airport security. She'd boarded a standby flight to London 6 hours ago. From there, the trail went cold. Kareem had offered to track her further, but Rashid had stopped him. Emma had run because she thought it would protect him and Ameer. Hunting her down would only prove she'd been right to be afraid, that powerful men always took what they wanted, regardless of consent or choice. He couldn't do that to her. But God, it hurt. As the sun rose over Dubai, painting his office in shades of gold and blood, Rashid's phone buzzed with an incoming message. Unknown number. Single sentence. "If you want to know who really destroyed Emma Carter, check your brother's old investigation files. Search Salma plus Hakim Group plus 2019. You're welcome. S.S.W." Rashid's blood went cold. His brother, Ahmed, had died 4 years ago. The official story was a heart attack, sudden and tragic. But Ahmed had been investigating something in the weeks before his death. Financial irregularities within the family holdings. He'd never finished. Rashid opened his private server and accessed the archived files that had been sealed after Ahmed's death. What he found made his hands shake with rage. Wire transfers from Salma's personal accounts to Hakim Group executives, 2019. Emails discussing removing obstacles to family consolidation. A proposal. Salma would marry Rashid, uniting both branches of the Al-Farouq fortune. And buried deep in the files, a medical examiner's report questioning the heart attack diagnosis, noting unusual markers consistent with certain cardiac medications taken in lethal doses. Ahmed hadn't died of natural causes. He'd been murdered, and Salma was the last person to see him alive, bringing him his evening tea the night he died. Rashid sat motionless, his entire world rewriting itself. His brother's death, Layla's accident. Had it really been an accident? Layla had been driving home from a meeting with family lawyers about updating her will. Salma had recommended the route she had taken. The lullaby? Somehow, impossibly, finding its way to an American orphan through a Brazilian volunteer. Had that been orchestrated too? Or was it the one genuine coincidence in a web of calculated moves? And Emma, innocent, kind Emma, who'd stumbled into the middle of a conspiracy she couldn't even imagine. Salma hadn't just tried to destroy Emma to clear her own path. She'd been willing to commit murder for it. Rashid forwarded the files to Kareem with a single instruction. Involve the authorities. All of it. Today. Then he went to find his son. Ameer was curled in his bed clutching the small music box Emma had given him, a cheap thing from a tourist shop, but it played a tinny version of the lullaby, and Ameer had treasured it. "Ameer," Rashid said softly, "may I come in?"
And then she was gone, and I've been so afraid of losing you, of forgetting her, of feeling anything that wasn't grief, that I've been living like a ghost. He took Ameer's small hands.
But Emma reminded me that love doesn't end when people leave. It changes. And sometimes the universe sends us new people to love, not to replace the ones we lost, but to help us remember how to be alive again. Do you love Emma? Ameer asked. Rashid had been avoiding that question for weeks, but in this moment, with his son looking at him with those ancient, knowing eyes, he couldn't lie. Yes, I think I do, and that terrifies me. Because she might leave too? Yes. Ameer considered this with the seriousness only a 5-year-old can muster. Mama's recording, the one you won't listen to. Does it have the lullaby? Rashid nodded, unable to speak. Can we listen to it together? I think maybe Mama would want us to. In all the grief counseling, all the therapy sessions, all the well-meaning advice Rashid had received in 3 years, no one had ever suggested something so simple and so impossible. Listen to Layla's recording, with his son, together. Are you sure? Rashid's voice was barely a whisper. I'm tired of being scared of Mama's voice, and I think you are too. With shaking hands, Rashid retrieved the phone from his safe. The recording was queued up, waiting. It had been waiting for 3 years. He pressed play. Layla's voice filled the room, warm, musical, alive in a way that made Rashid's chest feel like it was caving in. Hello, my beautiful boy. If you're listening to this, it means Mama isn't with you anymore. And I'm so sorry. A pause, the sound of Layla taking a shaky breath. I want you to know that leaving you was never a choice I made. I would have stayed forever if I could. But sometimes life has other plans. And when that happens, the love doesn't disappear. It transforms. The lullaby began, the same melody Emma had sung, but in Layla's voice it carried the weight of premonition and goodbye. Ya layali el-qamar, ya nujum el-sama. Rashid clutched Ameer to his chest, both of them sobbing as Layla sang the song she'd somehow known would outlive her. Rohimak, fi kul makan. When the lullaby ended, Layla's voice returned, softer now, intimate. Ameer, my love, listen to me. You are going to be sad sometimes. You are going to miss me. That's okay. Let yourself miss me. Let yourself cry. But please, my darling boy, don't let grief be the only thing you remember. Remember laughter. Remember joy. Remember that you are deeply, impossibly loved by me, by your father, and by all the people the universe will send to care for you. And Rashid's breath caught. He hadn't known this part existed. My love, if you're listening to this, it means you've been strong enough to face the pain. I'm proud of you. But now I need you to do something harder than grieving. I need you to live again. Don't stay frozen in the moment I left. Don't make my memory into a prison. Love our son. Laugh with him. And when the time comes, and it will come, don't be afraid to love someone new. The heart is not a betrayer. It's a miracle. And miracles are meant to be shared. If you find someone who makes you feel alive again, who sees Ameer's pain and doesn't look away, who carries kindness like a torch in the darkness, hold on to them, not because they replace me, but because love multiplies. It does not divide. I will always be with you, in the stars, in the wind, in every lullaby ever sung. But I want you to be with the living too. Be brave, my love, for both of you. I love you, forever and always. The recording ended. Father and son sat in the silence that followed, holding each other, letting the tears flow without shame. Finally, Ameer spoke. Mama wants you to find Emma. Rashid pressed his face into his son's hair. Mama was very wise. Are you going to do what she said? I'm going to try, but I need your help. What kind of help? Rashid pulled back and looked at his son seriously. I need you to be brave while I go find her. Can you do that? Ameer nodded solemnly. Bring her home, Papa. I will.
I promise." It was a promise he intended to keep. But first, there was justice to be served. Salma Al-Farouq arrived at the family estate for an emergency council meeting, confident in her victory. Emma Carter was gone. The American problem was solved. And Rashid, heartbroken and isolated, would finally see reason. He would accept that Salma was the logical choice, the safe choice, the choice that made sense. She entered the grand conference room to find not a family council, but Dubai police officials, federal investigators, and Rashid sitting at the head of the table with an expression of absolute zero. "What is this?" Salma demanded. "This," Rashid said quietly, "is accountability." The lead investigator stepped forward. "Salma Al-Farouq, you are under investigation for fraud, conspiracy, corporate espionage, and," he paused significantly, "the suspected murder of Ahmed Al-Farouq." The color drained from Salman's face. "That's absurd. Ahmed had a heart attack." "Ahmed was poisoned," Rashid stood, moving around the table with predatory calm. "The examiner's report was buried, but it's been reviewed. Digitoxin, administered in high doses over several days, causes symptoms identical to cardiac arrest, untraceable in routine autopsy." He stopped in front of her. "You brought him tea every evening for a week, tea you personally prepared. You can't prove." "We have his personal diary. He documented everything. His suspicions about your financial dealings with the Hakim Group, your attempts to seduce him into changing his will, your growing desperation when he refused. He was about to expose you, so you killed him." Salma's mask finally cracked. "He was going to destroy everything, the family, the legacy. He was going to expose your crimes, and when I wouldn't fall in line either, you fabricated evidence to destroy an innocent woman. That pathetic American. She was nothing, a distraction from your responsibilities. She was everything you're not. Kind, honest, brave enough to be vulnerable." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And she made my son smile. Something you, with all your schemes and manipulation, never managed." Salma lunged forward, her composure completely shattered. "I loved you. I gave up years of my life positioning myself to be perfect for you, and you threw it away for a homeless orphan. You loved power. I was just the path to it." The investigators moved forward with handcuffs. As they led Salma away, she screamed at Rashid, "You'll regret this. The family will never accept her. You're destroying the Al-Farouq name for a woman who ran away." The door closed, silencing her final venomous words. Khalid, who'd been present for the entire confrontation, approached Rashid slowly. "I owe you an apology," the older man said quietly. "We all do. We should have trusted your judgment. Yes, you should have. But I failed too. I let Emma face your judgment alone instead of standing beside her. I let protocol matter more than people, and I lost something I may never get back." "Then find her," Khalid said simply. "Use every resource this family has. Bring her home, and when you do, she will have our complete protection and acceptance. You have my word." Rashid nodded once. Then he turned and left the room. He had a promise to keep. It took 4 days and every resource at Rashid's disposal. Private investigators, flight manifests, credit card traces, social media analysis, security footage from 3 continents. Emma Carter had gone to London, then Manchester, then Glasgow, each time checking into hostels under her real name. She wasn't hiding, just running on autopilot, moving through spaces without inhabiting them. When Rashid's investigators sent photos, his heart broke all over again. Emma was volunteering in the children's program, teaching kids to sing, braiding a little girl's hair, sitting with a teenage boy who looked like he carried the weight of the world. She was doing what she had always done, pouring herself into caring for broken children because she understood their pain. And she looked so tired, so much older than she'd had just a week ago. Rashid booked a flight that night.
The Chicago Children's Community Center was nothing like the opulent spaces Emma had temporarily inhabited in Dubai. Peeling paint, worn linoleum floors, donated furniture that had seen better decades, but the walls were covered with children's artwork, and the sound of laughter filtered through the corridors, and there was something honest about the place that luxury could never replicate. Rashid felt dramatically out of place in his tailored suit and expensive shoes. He found Emma in the music room, sitting cross-legged on the floor with 6 children, ranging from about 4 to 10 years old. She was teaching them the lullaby.
It's a skill you learn when nobody's looking for you. The words landed like accusations. Emma, what are you doing here, Rashid? Did you come to make sure I'm not selling stories to tabloids? Because I'm not. I would never. I know. I came because... He stopped, realizing that every prepared speech had evaporated. I came because I listened to Lila's recording. The whole thing. Emma's expression softened slightly. And? She told me to find you. Well, not you specifically, but someone who makes me feel alive. Someone who sees Ameer's pain and doesn't look away. Someone who carries kindness like a torch in the darkness. He took a step closer. She described you perfectly, 3 years before we met. Tears welled in Emma's eyes. That's beautiful. But it doesn't change what happened. Your family hates me. The media is calling me a gold digger. Ameer is better off. Ameer is heartbroken. He thinks everyone he loves leaves. And I'm terrified he's learning that lesson because I failed to fight hard enough for the people who matter. You fought. You defended me to your family. And then I retreated into strategy instead of standing beside you. I let you face the storm alone. Rashid closed the remaining distance between them. I promised you wouldn't be discarded. And then I let you believe you had to leave to protect us. I failed you, Emma, completely. It's not your fault. It is. And I'm here to do what I should have done a week ago. He knelt before her, this powerful man in a shabby community center in Chicago, on his knees in front of a woman the world said he shouldn't want. Rashid, what are you doing? Emma Carter, I am asking you, not commanding, not offering a transaction, but asking, will you come home? To me, to Ameer, to a life that won't be easy or perfect, but will be honest and full of people who value you exactly as you are. Emma's tears spilled over. Your family has apologized. Salma has been arrested. The forged documents have been exposed. The entire council has promised you your protection and acceptance. He took her hands. But more than that, I want you there. Not as an employee, not as a convenience, as someone I'm falling in love with and don't want to lose. You can't love me. You barely know me. I know you sang to my son when he was drowning in grief. I know you faced false accusations with courage instead of running immediately. I know you chose to leave because you thought it would protect people you cared about, not because you wanted to go. His grip tightened. I know that when you sing Lila's lullaby, I don't hear ghosts, I hear hope. And I know that Ameer smiles when you're near, and so do I. Emma was sobbing now. I'm scared. I'm so scared of trying and failing again. So am I. Terrified. But Lila told me something in that recording. She said miracles are meant to be shared. And Emma, you feel like a miracle. He stood, still holding her hands, bringing them to his chest. Come home, please. Let us try together. For a long moment, Emma simply looked at him, searching for lies, for cracks, for the inevitable moment when he'd realize she was too much trouble. But all she saw was a man who'd crossed oceans to kneel in front of her, who'd listened to his dead wife's blessing to love again, who was brave enough to risk his heart on someone the world said didn't belong. What about the media? The gossip? Let them talk. I've issued a statement declaring you under my complete protection and introducing you as a valued member of my household. Anyone who disparages you answers to me. What about my business partners? My reputation? My reputation is that I'm ruthless in protecting what matters to me. And Emma, you matter so much. She broke. All the walls she'd built over 26 years of disappointment and abandonment crumbled, and she fell into his arms, sobbing against his heartbeat, while he held her like she was precious instead of broken. Is this real? Please tell me this is real. It's real. I'm real. This moment is real. And if you come home with me, every morning after this will be real too. Emma pulled back just enough to look at his face. Ameer, does he hate me for leaving? He's waiting for you. He told me to bring you home. Fresh tears. He said that? He's wiser than both of us. Emma laughed through her crying, a sound of relief and joy and tentative, fragile hope. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll come home. Rashid's smile was transformative. The severe, controlled sheikh became simply a man who'd been given a second chance at happiness. He kissed her forehead gently, reverently, like sealing a vow. Thank you, he breathed, for being brave enough to try. Thank you for coming to find me. They stood in that shabby music room, holding each other, while children's laughter echoed through the walls, and for the first time in their respective broken lives, the future felt like a promise instead of a threat. The grand opening of the Sheikh Al-Farouq Children's Center was attended by dignitaries, celebrities, and press from 3 continents. But the most important attendees were the 50 children from group homes and displacement centers across Dubai who would call this place home until permanent families were found, and even after, if they needed support. The center was everything Lila would have wanted. Bright, warm, filled with music and art and the radical idea that every child deserved to be valued. Emma Carter stood on the stage, no longer wearing borrowed clothes, but still choosing simplicity over opulence, and addressed the crowd. 3 years ago, a woman named Sheikh Al-Farouq recorded a lullaby for her son. She sang about love that transcends death, about souls that watch over the people they cherish, about light that refuses to be extinguished. That lullaby found its way to me through impossible coincidence, and it led me here, to a family I didn't know I was searching for, and a purpose I didn't know I needed. This center is proof that love multiplies, that healing is possible, that when we open our hearts to the broken and displaced and forgotten, we become more whole ourselves. She looked at Rashid, standing in the front row with Ameer perched on his shoulders, both of them smiling at her with unguarded affection. Lila once said that miracles are meant to be shared. So we're sharing this one with every child who walks through these doors. This is your home. You are safe, you are valued, and you are loved. The applause was thunderous, but Emma barely heard it, because Ameer was making urgent hand signals, their private sign for "Sing the Song." Emma smiled and nodded. Without microphone or accompaniment, she began the lullaby. Ya layali el-qamar, ya nujum el-qamar. Ameer's small voice joined hers, then Rashid's deeper one, and finally the 50 children who'd been taught the melody in preparation for this moment. Rohi ma'aki fi kul makan. The song rose and swelled, filling the auditorium with the sound of broken people choosing to believe in love again. When it ended, Rashid approached the stage and took Emma's hand. "There's one more thing," he said to the crowd. Then, quietly, just to Emma, "If you'll allow it." Emma's heart raced. "What?"
Rashid turned to face her fully, in front of hundreds of witnesses, and said the words he'd been carrying for months. Emma Carter, you stumbled into our lives singing a song you shouldn't have known, and you healed wounds I thought were permanent. You made my son laugh again. You taught me that grief and love can coexist. You showed me that home is not a place or a bloodline, but a choice we make every day to show up for the people who matter. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Emma's breath caught. I'm not asking you to replace Lila. I'm asking you to build something new with me, something that honors the past while embracing the future. He opened the box to reveal a simply band, no enormous diamond, no ostentatious display, just elegant craftsmanship and thoughtful design. Will you marry me? Will you be my partner, Ameer's mother, and the woman who reminds me every day that miracles are real? Emma's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming freely. I'm still broken, still figuring out how to believe I deserve this. Then we'll figure it out together. I'm not looking for perfect, Emma. I'm looking for you. She looked at Ameer, who was bouncing with excitement, looked at the crowd of supporters who'd become unlikely family, looked at the center bearing Lila's name, proof that love could transform grief into purpose. And she looked at Rashid, this man who'd knelt in.
The private garden of the Al-Farouq estate had been transformed for the wedding. Not the massive society event Salma would have demanded, but an intimate gathering of 50 people who actually mattered. Emma wore a simple ivory dress, flowers in her hair, bare feet on the grass, because shoes felt too formal for something this sacred. Rashid stood at the altar in traditional white robes, Ameer beside him in matching attire, both of them looking at Emma like she'd hung the moon. The ceremony was short and bilingual, honoring both cultures without privileging either. But the most important moment came at the end, when the officiant asked if anyone had words to share. Rashid pulled out his phone and pressed play. Layla's voice filled the garden, the final portion of her recording, the part he'd kept private until this moment. Rashid, if you've found love again, and you're listening to this on your wedding day, I want you to know I'm not haunting you, I'm celebrating with you. Love is not a betrayal, it's the highest honor you can give to someone who's gone, to prove that what we shared was strong enough to teach you how to love again. Take care of each other. Build a life full of laughter and music and children who know they're cherished. And sometimes when you sing our lullaby, remember me fondly. But don't stay there. Keep living, keep loving, keep becoming. I love you, always. Now go kiss your bride and start your beautiful new life. When the recording ended, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Rashid looked at Emma, his own tears unashamed. She would have loved you. Emma smiled through her crying. I wish I could have known her. You do. Every time you sing to Ameer, every time you create beauty from brokenness, every time you choose love despite fear. He took her face in his hands. You carry her gift forward, and that's the greatest tribute she could ask for. The officiant, wiping her own tears, managed to say, You may kiss your bride. Rashid kissed Emma slowly, sweetly, sealing promises and healing wounds and creating something entirely new from the fragments of what had been lost. When they pulled apart, Ameer tugged on both of them. Can we sing now? Emma laughed. Yes, Habibi, we can sing now. The three of them, father, son, and the woman who'd wandered into their grief and transformed it, began the lullaby. Yalaya lil emr, ya nujum el-qamar. The guests joined in, the melody swelling and rising, carrying on the desert wind like a prayer of gratitude. And somewhere in the shifting light of the late afternoon, in the space between grief and joy, past and future, death and rebirth, it felt like Layla was smiling. The camera pulls back slowly, capturing the garden, the family, the community gathered to witness love's stubborn refusal to be defeated by loss. The lullaby continues, growing softer as the image fades. Rohi mahaki fi kul maken, la tahaf ya habibi, ana huna. My soul is with you, in every place. Don't be afraid, my beloved, I am here. Fade to black. The end.